Populism, it's a word that gets thrown around all the time in our political conversations, right? It's used to describe all sorts of leaders and movements, but what are we really talking about, especially here in the US? Well, in this explainer, we're going to unpack the long, pretty complicated, and honestly fascinating story of American populism, which at its heart is a story of the people versus the powerful.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the basic definition, then get into the split between its left and right wing flavors. We're going to trace its modern history, look at the playbook it uses, see how things just exploded after 2008, and then we'll land on what populism really is in America today. All right, let's dive right in. Section 1. What is American populism?
So, what is this political force, really? What's the fundamental idea taking away at its core? It seems like a simple question, but man, the answer is the key to unlocking so much of American political history.
Okay, at its most basic level, populism sets up a battle between two teams, the people and the elites. The whole story is that ordinary folks, the hardworking backbone of the nation, are being ignored, forgotten, and kind of ripped off by a powerful, out-of-touch establishment. And the hero of this story, historically, has always been the virtuous producer. Think the farmer, the factory worker, the person running a small business. This figure is painted as the moral center of the country. But, and this is super important, they're defined not just by fighting the parasitic elites above them, but also by standing apart from what are seen as dependent or unproductive groups below them. It's this three-part view of society that's absolutely crucial to understanding this. And that brings us to a huge fork in the road. Because while all populists say they're fighting an elite, who they point their finger at, who they say that elite is, well, that creates two very, very different kinds of movements. So on the left, the big bad is concentrated economic power. We're talking Wall Street, giant corporations, the super rich. But on the right, the enemy is usually seen as the government itself, the state, liberal culture, and what George Wallace famously called those pointy-headed bureaucrats getting in everyone's business. If you want a perfect snapshot of left-wing populism, look no further than Huey Long. He was the fiery governor of Louisiana back in the Great Depression. His whole slogan, "Every man a king," and his Share the Wealth plan, it was aimed squarely at taking money from the richest of the rich and giving it to the common person. But here's the thing. The source material argues that for the last 60 years or so, populism has been a way more powerful and consistent force on the political right. So let's track how that shift happened. It really catches fire in all the social chaos of the 1960s. You have George Wallace building this huge following by attacking the government on issues like integration. Then Richard Nixon sees how powerful that is, and he polishes the message, speaking directly to a silent majority of forgotten Americans. Ronald Reagan rides that wave right into the White House, going after both big government and so-called welfare queens. And by the time we get to the 90s, Pat Buchanan is out there declaring a full-on cultural war. And that very same year, 1992, all that feeling just boiled over and completely disrupted politics. An independent candidate, Ross Perot, tapped into all that frustration with Washington insiders. Now, he didn't win, but he pulled in a frankly shocking 19% of the popular vote. It was just proof of how powerful that anti-establishment anger had become. So, how does this actually work? I mean, what's the secret sauce? It's not just what is being said, it's how it's being said. The style is all about performance, rage, and being willing to just smash the rules. I mean, just look at this moment from 1985. You've got President Reagan, a former movie star, literally quoting the vigilante cop Dirty Harry to threaten Congress. This is pure populist theater. He's playing the part of a tough outsider who's going to get justice his own way and forget about the stuffy rules of Washington. And that performance is just one part of a bigger playbook. You've got the performance of the low, where leaders like George Wallace would intentionally mess up words to sound less like an elite. Then there's transgressive rage, using really shocking language to break political norms. And finally, there's symbolic violence, that kind of talk that paints your opponents not just as wrong, but as enemies who need to be punished. Okay, so let's fast forward into our own era, because the 2008 financial crisis was like pouring gasoline on a fire. That shock to the system basically unleashed two incredibly powerful but totally different populist waves. And right here, you can see that fundamental split we talked about in real time. The Tea Party aimed all its anger at the state, government spending, taxes, the bailouts. At the exact same time, you have the left-wing populist movement, Occupy Wall Street, targeting the economic elite, the 1% and the big banks, and using protests to show how they were the victims of a broken system. And you don't have to take my word for it. The Tea Party's own mission statement lays it out perfectly. Their enemy wasn't Wall Street, it was Washington, D.C., and what they saw as completely out of control government. Meanwhile, on the other side of that populist divide, the rallying cry was just a simple number: 99%. You know, the phrase "we are the 99%," which started on a simple blog, was just a stroke of populist genius. It instantly created this huge, inclusive identity for literally anyone who felt left behind by an economy that only seemed to work for the top 1%. It was an incredibly powerful way to define the people. So, after all this, what are we left with? What is American populism at the end of the day? Is it a fixed ideology like socialism or conservatism? Well, the source material points to a different answer. And this, right here, is the biggest takeaway. In the United States, populism isn't really a formal set of beliefs. It's a political style. It's a language, a mode of persuasion that can be attached to all sorts of different ideologies. Its power comes from claiming to speak for the ultimate authority in America: the people. So why is that? Well, for one, the US political system itself, with its checks and balances, makes it really hard for a single populist party to grab and hold power. So instead, the style just pops up inside different candidates and movements, but its real juice comes from tapping into that core American belief that the people are in charge. And the key, the thing that keeps it going, is that the definition of who gets to be the people is always, always up for grabs. Which leaves us with one final and really critical question. In an age like ours, with huge inequality and a country that's constantly changing, the fight to define who represents the real, authentic people, that's going to continue to be one of the most powerful and disruptive forces in American politics. So, who gets to claim that title next? Well, that's a story that's still being written.